Late one night in spring, a man and his wife are awoken by a scream next door. They leap up to see what's happening, and when they get outside, several other neighbors are already headed toward the sound. It's coming from inside one of the houses. They push their way inside, but what they would find would uproot the lives of everyone on that island. Within 24 hours, thousands of people across the island dragged their mattresses into the streets, too afraid to close their eyes indoors. And before the week was over, the entire island stopped sleeping. What happened next would blur the line between panic and something far older. Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. A quick note before we hop into today's episode. While it's based on a true story, some sources may conflict as history has a way of blurring facts, and names will almost certainly be mispronounced, so just take it as entertainment. In the warm night air of Pemba Island, off the coast of Zanzibar, the world was still. It was late March 1995. The moon hung low over the Indian Ocean like a pale coin, and for once, even the dogs weren't barking. Just inside a small concrete house, a man named Muhammad Abdallah lies sleeping after a hard day of work. Most of the people on Pemba Island made their living through manual or coastal labor like farming or fishing, and though it was a lot of work, it was quiet and satisfying life. A little after midnight, Muhammad's eyes shot open. He was jolted awake, but he didn't know why. So he's looking around from his bed in the dark room and he's listening, but he doesn't see anything, and he thinks to himself it must have just been the wind making the shutters move and make a noise that woke him up. But as he starts to roll over, he realizes he can't move. It's like something heavy was pinning his chest to the bed. He struggles for a minute and then tries to call out for his wife, but nothing is coming out. He's not making a sound, and he's really starting to panic at this point when all of a sudden he hears something. It's like a slow, deliberate sound of something flapping, like canvas or leather, something being waved and dragged through the air. He's trying to look around and see what it is, but before he can see it, he gets hit with this rank, sulfuric stench that almost made him retch, and it was so strong that it burned his eyes. Then hot breath brushed his ear, and for a moment, he swore something laughed. Not in mockery, but in recognition. Muhammad's heart raced. He's trying as hard as he can to move, to get away from whatever's happening. Then he hears something speaking. It sounds like three voices all at once, and it says, "You will tell them. You will make them believe." And just as it finished speaking, Muhammad feels a stinging blow to his ribs, and the frame of the bed starts shaking violently. The shutters slammed open, even though the air outside was still, and he heard the tearing sound above him. It was claws on wood, and then a rush of air just rattled the lamp next to him and sent it crashing to the floor. The neighbors start hearing the screams of just absolute terror, and immediately they know something's not right. So they rush over to his house, and when they got there, it was quiet. They try opening the door, but it's locked, and they banged on it and called out his name, but when he doesn't answer, they collectively decide to break down the door, and they rush inside, and right away that they can see his bed is thrown off the frame, the window screen is shredded, there are deep scratches along the ceiling beam, and Muhammad was leaned up against the wall, just trembling, drenched in sweat, and barely able to speak from shock and fear. By sunrise, he had packed his things and moved out of the house. But the story spread fast. First across the island, then across the sea to Zanzibar. The word was Popobawa. In Swahili, it means bat wing. But to the people, it wasn't just a creature. It was a curse. People said the Popobawa came at night, slipping into homes, attacking those who doubted its existence, punishing the skeptics first. And that rumor alone was enough to turn a peaceful island into a sleepless one. In the coastal village of Chake Chake, Families dragged mattresses into the streets, and entire neighborhoods slept outside, shoulder to shoulder under the stars, too afraid to close their eyes indoors. They thought their best chance at safety was in numbers. But this had its downside too. When one person screamed, others followed. Local police sergeant Abdul Rahman said, "It was chaos. When one screamed, everybody screamed. We fired shots in the air. At what? I don't know." Children cried, elders prayed, the entire town echoed with the same word whispered in fear: Popobawa. But there was one man who refused to participate in what he thought was utter nonsense. His friends worried about him. They would try to get him to join out in the streets, but he always refused. And finally, he got fed up with their asking and told them they were just fools who were afraid of shadows. And the friends brushed it off. His insults didn't stick. They just left him with an open invitation to join them as they went to bring their beds back outside for the night. Soon everybody got settled in for the night, once again with their beds out all along the streets. And a couple of hours go by, and then a scream fills the air. The man who, just hours earlier, called his friends fools, had stumbled into the street, half-dressed, and he's screaming that something was inside his house. His roof was torn open, with the tin peeled back like it was paper, and from then on, he refused to sleep indoors again. The next night, the island didn't sleep at all. What began as one man's terror had become a contagion that spread faster than any disease. At dusk, every village across Pemba, parts of Unguja, had moved mats into courtyards and bedding on rooftops. Whole families huddled together at night. Some built small bonfires to keep the Popobawa away. Others hung amulets, cloves, or Quran verses above their doors. The streets smelled of smoke, seawater, and sweat. But still the sightings continued. As people would lie on their mats at night, occasionally they would feel the flap of its wings go by, and people would start to shout, "Popobawa, Popobawa," and run. It wasn't just while they were sleeping, though. At Chake Market, a man looks up and sees a dark figure on a rooftop. He pointed it out to someone nearby, and it's kind of just trying to figure out what he's seeing, and as their eyes focus on it, they realize this is the leathery winged creature that's been tormenting the villages. And within seconds, hundreds of people stampeded in retreat. Baskets, sandals, and food just scattered across the dirt road as people are leaving, and police fired shots at it in the night sky, but they couldn't tell if they hit it or not, and it just spread its wings, took off, and disappeared into the sky. Sergeant Rahman wrote in his logbook, "Unidentified flying object sighted by civilians. Area searched, no result. Citizens hysterical." When dawn broke, there were bruised arms, twisted ankles, and a dozen homes abandoned. Left open, lamps still burning. Not far from there, in the village of Wete, an old fisherman named Hamisi swore he saw it land near the shore. He described a gray-skinned figure, about 5 feet tall, crouched on all fours like a man pretending to be an animal. Its wings were folded against its back, and they were wet and just leathery, dripping with seawater. And when his flashlight beam caught its eyes, they flashed red, and it leapt, clearing the rocks in a single bound and vanishing in the darkness. And Hamisi almost jumped out of his own skin. He threw the lantern and ran until his feet bled. And when police returned with him at dawn, they found footprints pressed deep into the sand. But, sure enough, they ended abruptly as if the creature had taken off, just like Hamisi said. Still, not everyone believed. A young teacher named Khalid Nasor laughed at the panic on a radio broadcast, saying, "We are educated people. There are no demons, only fear." But, much like the last open mocker, that night he woke to the sound of his tin roof warping. It was like hands trying to pry it open, and rain poured through the gap, dousing his lamp. Then something heavy slammed onto his bed, and then he saw it. Khalid managed to leap out of bed and scramble for the door. He threw it open and ran outside screaming, and when he got to the crowd, he fell to his knees, clutching his chest, and through labored breaths, he said it had wings and eyes like coal. By morning, his house stood silent. roof half torn off, mattress shredded by something with claws. And though Khalid survived the encounter unharmed, he left the island the next day. And for a week, it seemed to move south, village to village, always at night, always leaving behind claw marks, broken roofs, or whispers of an awful smell. Reports arrived from Dar es Salaam and routers. The government called for calm, calling it mass hysteria fueled by rumor. But that didn't explain the hundreds of consistent descriptions or the livestock that had been found dead without a drop of blood. People began to say that the Popobawa was migrating. When it finished with Pemba, it would cross the channel to Zanzibar. And within days, entire districts of Stonetown dragged mattresses into the courtyard as well, and phone lines jammed up with reports. Then, after a week of sleepless nights, the attacks suddenly stopped. No one knew why. Theories bloomed that maybe it was a witch's curse that had lifted, or an exorcism succeeded, or maybe the Popobawa just moved on. But in the months that followed, strange things did pick back up. People waking paralyzed, hearing fluttering above their beds, roofs scratched overnight, but it wasn't as bad as it had been. And for years, there was relative quiet, and eventually it seemed like all was well again. With the chaos in 1995, reporters and researchers poured into Zanzibar. They interviewed dozens of witnesses, police officers, priests, doctors. The Tanzanian government called it a social panic. The Ministry of Health sent psychologists, and one researcher from Dar es Salaam noted, "Every witness is sincere. The fear is genuine, but the evidence is none. The only physical clues were the scratched doors, torn mosquito nets, and that sulfuric smell that no one could explain." Doctors began diagnosing sleep paralysis, the body frozen between dreaming and waking, and the mind projecting terror into the half-real world around it. They said that the Popobawa was simply a symptom, not of demons, but exhaustion and stress. And yet, that didn't explain why entire villages reported seeing the same creature together. Anthropologists traced the story backward. They found roots in older Swahili folklore, where jinn, spirits of smoke and flame, were said to wander islands at night. But the name Popobawa only appeared after 1964's Zanzibar Revolution, when political upheaval and violence tore through the island. Some scholars believe that the Popobawa was born from trauma, just a supernatural mask for real human fear, oppression, instability, and collective guilt. But over time, a pattern emerged. The Popobawa didn't attack randomly. It migrated. Every few years, reports would flare up like brush fires, first in Pemba, then in Unguja, then fade into silence until the next wave. In 2007, it resurfaced. People described the same sulfuric smell, the same paralysis, and same voice whispering through open windows. A teacher named Asha Suleiman told reporters, "It came through the window. I couldn't move. It was heavy, breathing fast. When I shouted, 'Popobawa,' it hissed, and the air turned cold." Her neighbors found her front door splintered from the inside. The lamp overturned, glass everywhere. And that night, hundreds more fled their homes. Some went to mosques, others went to open fields. Even in the city, with power lines humming and radios playing, they said that they could just feel it watching from the rooftops. But now there were cell phones, and for the first time, recordings. In one clip that circulated online, a shaky camera shows the night sky over Zanzibar town. A dark shape crosses in front of the moon briefly and then vanishes. Seconds later, you hear a man scream and the phone drops. Police investigated, but they didn't really find anything, and skeptics called it a hoax, but the timing and the sheer panic that followed mirrored the 1995 outbreak exactly. A journalist named Abdul Karim claimed to capture the creature on tape as well. The recording was never officially verified, but it begins with silence, then footsteps, and the sound like canvas flapping in the wind, and a low growl that doesn't sound human. The journalist gasps, the recorder drops, and the tape ends with a single word whispered in Swahili, that translated to yes. He disappeared a week later, returning to Dar es Salaam, and police found his motorcycle by the roadside with the engine cold, but keys still in the ignition. Years later, one police officer who had dismissed the 1995 panic gave an interview, and he admitted that he had seen something that night, something that he couldn't explain. He said, I saw it above the trees, a shape, gliding. It wasn't a bird, and when my flashlight hit it, I swear I saw eyes looking back at me. He paused and then added quietly that he had never filed that report. He died in 2013, heart failure in his sleep. Locals said it was a coincidence, and others said that it was the work of the Popobawa. Today, stories still surface. A tourist uploads a video of something crossing the moon above Pemba Channel, a dark silhouette with outstretched wings. Another traveler posts a photo of claw marks carved into the wood, a door in Mishowane, taken a morning after a local wedding party fled their house. And the government doesn't comment anymore. They don't really need to. The island already has its mind made up. When the wind shifts from the sea and the air tastes faintly of sulfur, people still leave their doors open and light fires. They still whisper the name. Psychologists point to mass hysteria, a phenomenon where fear spreads like infection and it's amplified by rumor and expectation. And they compare it to medieval dancing plagues, witch hunts, or the mad gasser of Matun, just shared delusions born from tension and suggestion. But that too leaves one final question unanswered. If it's all imagination, then why does the Popobawa seem to know when to return? Why does it arrive precisely when unrest, fear, or political tension rises, as though it senses chaos and feeds on it? Now, decades later, the fear still lingers, not always in reports or newspapers, but in small moments. Someone hears wings on a still night. They smell something like sulfur passing through an open window. Dogs whine and go silent. And suddenly, the people remember the old stories. They whisper its name again, Popobawa. The island thought it had survived the nightmare. Years passed. Children who once slept outside grew up, moved into the mainland, told their own kids that the Popobawa was just a story, just a superstition for sleepless nights. But legends don't always die. Sometimes they just wait. And when fear takes shape, it rarely disappears. It just finds a new place to hide. For the people of Zanzibar, the Popobawa was more than a monster. It was a plague that became part of history. So if you ever find yourself on the coast of East Africa and the air turns heavy, thick with smoke and salt, listen closely. The Popobawa doesn't always attack. Sometimes it just watches. And when the night wind whispers through the palms, you'll understand why the island still leaves its doors open. Thanks for listening to Legends May Live. If you enjoyed today's story, please make sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts and share it with someone who loves the strange, the haunted, and the unexplained. Because here we know that legends may live.